Recently, researchers have begun to examine the emotional and behavioral effects of oxytocin. In one study, researchers tracked oxytocin levels in women's blood during the first and third trimester of pregnancy, and then during the first postpartum month. A stronger attachment between the mother-to-be and her fetus was associated with a pattern of increasing oxytocin during pregnancy. Levine, Zacharie-Sharon, Feldman, and Weller, 2007. Higher oxytocin levels in early pregnancy and postpartum also predicted attentive mothering, including more attachment-related thoughts, gaze at the infant, affectionate touch, and frequent infant checking. Feldman, Weller, Zacharie-Sharon, and Levine, 2007. Unlike rodents, human maternal behavior does not critically depend upon oxytocin. After all, high-quality infant care is given by adoptive mothers, by mothers whose babies have been carried by surrogates, and by other relatives and adult caretakers. But oxytocin does appear to play a supplementary role in enhancing bonding in the early weeks. What remains to be understood is where and how oxytocin is affecting the brain. We can gain some ideas from neuroscientists who have trained their sights on motherhood. THEY use scanning techniques such as magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, to map the structure of the brain. Lying in the scanner, the subject is surrounded by a giant magnet. THEY produces a magnetic field that aligns the protons of hydrogen atoms in the brain. THEY are then exposed to radio waves. 64. Mothers matter most. Women and parental investment. That cause the protons to spin out of alignment and, as they resume the previous position, they emit radio waves. THSA are used to construct an extremely detailed image. In one study, structural changes in the brain were assessed by examining mothers' gray matter volume, regions of the brain containing cell bodies and dendrites, once when their babies were 2 to 4 weeks old and then again when they were 3 to 4 months old. Kim et al., 2010. Every brain area that they investigated showed a significant increase between the two testing times. The more the mother experienced positive thoughts about her baby, the greater the increase in volume of a cluster of midbrain regions including the hypothalamus, substantia nigra, and amygdala. Animal studies indicate that the hypothalamus is associated with maternal motivation. If it is lesioned, mothers have a higher risk of infanticide, and its enlargement is correlated with the amount of interaction between mother and offspring. The substantia nigra is part of the wanting and liking reward system of the brain associated with the neurotransmitter dopamine. THSA regions are particularly activated when mothers view a picture of their smiling infant. Strathern, Lee, Fonagy, and Montague, 2008. The amygdala is involved in consolidating emotional learning about the infant. Other brain areas showed enlargement too, especially those that process somatosensory information, the smell, feel, sound, and sight of the infant, and the prefrontal cortex, the executive function of the brain that plans and executes new behavioral repertoires. What is surprising is not that these areas are more active after giving birth, but that they show changes in structure. A new maternal brain is being built. Other researchers have used functional MRI, fMRI, to investigate the specific activation of different brain regions in response to different baby-related stimuli. fMRI works much like regular MRI, but it exploits the fact that when an area of the brain becomes active, blood vessels dilate to attract fresh oxygenated blood. THs causes a change in the magnetic field which the scanner reads as the blood oxygen level dependent, bold, signal. In one study, mothers and fathers were interviewed and scanned 2 to 4 weeks after the birth of their baby and again at 12 to 16 weeks. See Swain, Lauderbaum, Cosse, and Strathern. 2007. In the scanner, they heard their own infant's cry as well as that of a strange infant and a control noise. Mothers of very young infants showed selective increased activation to their own babies in the midbrain, basal ganglia, cingulate, amygdala, and insula. THSA latter areas are associated with emotional alarm, threat detection, and arousal, the former with obsessive-compulsive thinking. THSA effects were much less pronounced in the new fathers. By the time the baby was 4 months old, these old brain, emotional regions had become less responsive and instead prefrontal cortical areas which modulate emotional reaction and organize planful behavior became more active. The new mothers. Women as heavy investors 65. seem to be shifting from an anxious emotional overreaction to their infant's distress to a calmer, more thoughtful behavioral response. Other researchers have used visual rather than auditory stimuli such as photographs of the infant and other unrelated babies, see Swain, Lauderbaum, Koze, and Strathern, 2007. When viewing their own infants, mothers showed greater activity in dopaminergic brain reward areas, in the fusiform gyrus, a part of the brain dedicated to processing and discriminating faces, in the hippocampus, involved in episodic memories of events, and in areas of the brain that are sensitive to the neuromodulator oxytocin. TH's link between central oxytocin and brain activation is an important avenue for future research. Neuroimaging studies are prizing open the doors to understanding the brain-mind nexus, but at present they are far from definitive. Findings can vary depending on which stimuli are compared, and which brain regions are chosen for investigation. Because we are only beginning to identify the functions of different brain areas, interpreting the results of fMRI studies is still fraught with difficulties. For example, amygdala activation has been variously argued to reflect fear, threat detection, stimulus salience, or a range of positive and negative emotions. Locking region to function is made even more difficult by the fact that increased blood oxygen merely tells us that a region is engaged, but that region may be excitatory or inhibitory in its effects. For now, all we can safely say is that there are postpartum structural changes in the maternal brain and that mothers become uniquely attuned to their own infant's appearance, smell, and sound. Women may or may not have a maternal instinct that makes them want babies, but they do seem to have a maternal adaptation for caring for them. There is a considerable overlap between neural sites implicated in parental and romantic love, and oxytocin is involved in both. The new mother effectively falls in love with her baby, she focuses on it exclusively, has intrusive thoughts, idealizes it and worries obsessively about possible harm, is distressed when separated, checks on it frequently, and engages in soothing, repetitive rituals. Leckman et al., 2005. Transition to motherhood is a strange mixture of love and anxiety. Baby is perfect, and yet helplessly dependent, creating alarm about anything that might harm it and prompting compulsive monitoring. And a mother who tends and cares is vital because the juvenile period is a great selection funnel into which many enter but from which few emerge. Lancaster, 1989, p. 65. Among carnivores only about 10% of animals born survive to adulthood, that figure is about 25% for non-human primates. Among human hunter-gatherers, half of the babies born survive to reproductive age. A critical factor in ensuring their survival will be the mother's ability not just to defend and feed her offspring but to ensure her own survival too. 66. Mothers matter most, women and parental investment. Without a mother, the life expectancy of infants is cut tragically short. As Mealy, 2000a, page 341, succinctly puts it, desertion by one's mother means almost certain death, whereas desertion by one's father generally means only a reduction of resources. Animal behaviorists have observed the fate of orphaned primates in the wild. Jane Goodall, 1986, followed the life of Flint, who was born to an aging female called Flo. He persisted with nursing until the age of 5 despite his mother's attempts to wean him, and he refused to give way even when a younger sister, Flame, was born. When Flame died, Flint became even closer to his mother, sharing her nest at night in the trees. When he was 8 years old, Flo died. Flint sat by his mother's body for hours and became increasingly inert and depressed over the next few days. Despite attempts by his older siblings to coax him into activity, he developed gastric enteritis and peritonitis, and 3 weeks later he was dead. A systematic study of Japanese macaques, Hasegawa and Hiraiwa, 1980, followed the fate of a number of orphans. 7 out of 9 who lost their mother in the first year of life died. Older orphans fared somewhat better. Of the 25 who lost their mother between 1 and 5 years of age, 5 disappeared or died. For humans in the West, medical advances mean that maternal death during childhood is a rare tragedy. When it does happen, the existence of monogamy, relative affluence, and welfare provision mean that the father, other relatives, or the state will assume the role of caretaker. But in the environment of evolutionary adaptation in which humans evolved, such safety nets were not always present. We can gain some idea of the fate of motherless children by examining the ethnographic and historical record. Several studies have gathered data on child mortality following parental death in societies with little or no access to medical care. Some come from contemporary hunter-gatherer or farming societies, others use data from early Europe. Examples of the FIAST are studies in Paraguay and rural Gambia. When anthropologists FIAST arrived to study them, the Ake of Paraguay were still forest living, and on every occasion when a mother died in the FIAST year of an infant's life, the child died also. Even at later ages, the best predictor of child mortality was maternal mortality. At all ages, motherless children were 5 times more likely to die than those whose mothers were alive, and they were 4.5 times more likely to be killed. Later, when the Ake moved to a reservation, far fewer adult deaths occurred. However, of the 4 children who lost their mothers, 2 died before maturity, while of the handful of fatherless children none died. Hill and Hurtado, 1996. In rural Gambia, Sear, Steele, McGregor, and Mace, 2002, focused on parent and child mortality up to the age of 5 The death of the father had virtually no effect on the likelihood of his child's. Women as heavy investors 67. Survival, but children who lost a mother were massively more at risk. If they were under the age of 2, these children were between 11 and 13 times more likely to die than those whose mothers were alive. Ostfriesland is a northwest German coastal region. Births, marriages, and deaths of the citizens who lived there between 1668 and 1879 were recorded in church documents. Volland, 1988, focused on 870 families in which the last-born child either survived the death of one of its parents during the FIAST year of life or was born alive after the father died. He examined how many went on to survive until their FIAST and 15th birthday. 1/4 died in the FIAST year and 45% died before the age of 15. In the FIAST year of life, child mortality was twice as high when the mother died, 33%, compared to the father, 18%. Overall, 52% of motherless children failed to survive until 15 years of age compared to 38% of fatherless infants. Sear and Mace, 2008, brought together information on the effect of maternal death from 28 different populations. In every case, it was associated with higher levels of child mortality. As they note, the consequences of losing a mother in very early life are catastrophic. p. 5. If the mother dies during childbirth, between 1 and 25% of infants survive. Th's latter figure was from Bangladesh in the 1980s. Up to 50% survive if her death occurs in the FIAST year of life. Nevertheless, a mother's death increases the odds of her baby dying in infancy by a factor of 6, in toddlerhood by a factor of 4, and in childhood by a factor of 2. See Pavard, Gagnon, Desjardins, and Heyer, 2005, Sear et al. 2002. A stunning fact that emerged from Sear and Mace's overview of studies was the small effect that fathers' deaths had on child mortality. In 68% of cases, a father's death had no impact on the survival chances of his child. In 32% of cases, it actually improved the child's odds of surviving. But we will return to this tantalizing riddle later. So mothers matter most in the early years, and it is not hard to see why. Gambian toddlers who lost their mothers weighed significantly less than their peers. In our evolutionary past, a mother breastfed for up to 4 years, and her infant's life literally depended upon her ability to sustain lactation. Mother's supply of breast milk was, and in many places still is, the best predictor of whether an infant lives or dies. Audi, 1999. To feed her baby, she required 600 to 700 additional calories every day, creating a situation where she had to forage regularly and successfully to meet these basic needs, to say nothing of the extra calories required for carrying the growing baby who accompanied her on these expeditions. The composition of breast milk itself provides one of the strongest clues that she took her baby with her. Unlike the fat-rich solution of animals who leave their offspring when they forage for food, women's milk contains only 3 to 4% fat and is 88% water. To sustain an infant on such 68 mothers matter most, women and parental investment. a weak mixture, the mother must have carried it with her and fed it for several minutes every hour during the day. At night, she may have fed the baby, or more likely the baby latched onto the nipple and fed itself 3 or 4 times. Beast feeding is a positive feedback system. The more milk the baby takes, the more production is stepped up. In this way, the baby effectively calls the shots, ensuring the correct amount of nutrients for its weight and growth. Lactation carried BNFETs for both the mother and baby. For the mother, by suppressing ovulation, it ensured optimal birth spacing between children. Effective suppression depends upon many small feeds, and those that take place during the night seem to be especially important. THSA trigger prolactin surges that are up to 6 times more intense than those that she experiences during the day, and it is prolactin that is responsible for the suppression of ovulation. The 3 to 4 year gap between children in hunter-gatherer societies was doubtless a result of the mother's continual breastfeeding. With agriculture and more predictable food availability, mothers could grind grain and cook it to create an easily digestible food for infants, which reduced the age of weaning to as early as 6 months. But this meant that mothers became pregnant again after shorter intervals and were placed in the evolutionary novel situation of caring for multiple dependent young at the same time. While we consider the low birth rate of Western populations as anomalous, Audi, 1999, points out that 100,000 years ago, women produced as few as 4 children in a lifetime, and this low birth rate seems to have been at the root of our very slow growth as a species. Anthropologists estimate that in the Pleistocene the human population was probably not more than about 100,000 people. It took 15,000 years for that population to double in size compared to our current doubling rate of 50 years, Hamill, 1996. Investment costs of children have always been high, and it is a wise woman who judges her timing well. For the baby, breast milk brought the advantages not just of perfectly tailored and digestible nutrients but a second survival boost, immunological protection, Cunningham, 1995. During pregnancy the fetus receives antibodies through the placenta from the mother. After the baby is born and before milk proper arrives, the mother produces colostrum, a thick cream-colored mixture that is rich in antibodies. By the 4th month of lactation, the baby receives as much as half a gram of antibodies each day. Because mother and infant are bonded together day and night by lactation, they are exposed to the same pathogens, and the mother is able to supply exactly the antibodies that the baby needs. Mother's milk is especially geared to attack antigens that cause dysentery and diarrhea, the most dangerous of potential infant killers. For mother and baby, breastfeeding brought with it prolonged and pleasurable skin-to-skin contact. Infants suckling stimulates the release of oxytocin in First Love 69. The mother, generating feelings of warmth and contentment that may be passed back through the milk to the infant, Audi, 1999. Both mother and child seem to be soothed by feeding, and this sense of well-being may be as much to do with oxytocin as with the infant's full stomach and the mother's relief at dispatching the heavy load of milk she has accumulated. His special kind of relationship with the infant was exclusively reserved for mothers. Our males of some species deliver food to the young, and some male birds produce crop milk, a mixture of partially digested food and mucus produced in the throat. Males do not lactate. Female specifies C. Nature of lactation with the massive demands it makes on energy and time was a natural consequence of a woman's certainty of genetic relatedness and the huge investment that she had already made in that baby. First love. Bond between mother and infant is the primary social relationship, Fedigan, 1982, and it extends far beyond milk provision. Is as evident in chimpanzees as in humans. Like us, chimpanzees are slow to mature. Are weaned at the age of 4 or 5 with the females reaching sexual maturity at 11, though, because of adolescent sterility, the fast pregnancy does not occur until about 13 years of age. Males may be able to produce sperm by the age of 9 but are not sexually mature until about 14 years of age. Childhood then is long and is spent in an intimate relationship with the mother. Despite intense curiosity about the newborn shown by community members, the chimpanzee mother prevents any of them from touching the infant during the first 6 months of life. She provides milk, and in later years she shares fruits, nuts, and honey freely with her offspring. She shushes for termites and dips for ants, showing the offspring how to create and use the tools they need for this. She protects them from the volatile temper of adult males and is constantly watchful when they are close by. A band of chimpanzees may be composed of between 15 and 80 individuals, but during waking hours they travel in smaller parties. Mothers usually travel alone with their offspring, coming together with the community at night to make their tree nests. During daylight hours, the mother seeks out areas that have sufficient food resources for herself and her infant, and this means that adult females spend relatively little time together compared to the males. The mother-infant bond is strong and is broken only when her adolescent daughter must emigrate from the group to seek mates among neighboring groups. Observations of mother-infant interactions among chimpanzees show a three-phase development from infant dependence to juvenile autonomy. Marvin, 1997. In the Phi-Ast stage, lasting until about 10 months of age, the infant 70. Mothers matter most. Women and parental investment. Has poor locomotor and communication skills and is unresponsive to adult attempts to communicate. Because of this, the mother maintains very close proximity, suckles the infant frequently, and protects it from other troop members. Corresponds to the human age range from birth to about 15 months, during which human infants are equally socially inept and mothers in all cultures perform the same tasks. In phase 2, which for chimps extends from about 6 months to 4 years, the infant begins to eat solid food, becomes more adept at independent locomotion, masters communication skills to keep in contact with the mother over a longer range, and begins to communicate with other members of the troop. During this time, a secure attachment between the two becomes evident. Mother is used as a base for exploration. Infant leaves the mother occasionally for short excursions, it plays with other youngsters and practices communicative signals, it becomes responsible for reinstating contact with the mother, although she maintains close visual monitoring of the infant, and the two reunite immediately when danger is perceived. At last, in the juvenile phase, the mother has a new infant to care for and the youngster is independent of the mother in terms of feeding and locomotion. It possesses all the receptive and expressive communication skills required for integration into the social group. Juvenile travels with the mother but spends increasing time with other troop members and becomes more responsible for its own protection, though the mother may still intervene in an emergency. His whole pattern shows strong parallels with human youngsters. John Bowlby, 1969, in his explicitly ethological theory of human development, describes the human infant's emotional attachment to the mother, the use of the mother as a safe base from which to explore, and the child's internalization of a working model of the mother as a source of security in her absence. Human mothers and infants form close bonds from the beginning of the infant's life. Just 48 hours after birth, a mother can distinguish the cry of her own infant. Wiesenfeld and Klorman, 1978. Her baby reciprocates by distinguishing the sound of its mother's voice. Field, 1985, and the unique features of her face. Bushnell, Sy, and Mullen, 1989. During the Phi-Ast 6 months, mother and child engage in mutual imitation, smiling, and vocal turn-taking. Between 2 and 4 months, studies using forehead temperature change demonstrate a positive emotional reaction to the mother and a negative response to strangers. Mizukami, Kobayashi, Ishii, and Iwata, 1990. Between 7 and 11 months, the infant is able to display behavioral evidence of this specific attachment by responding with distress to the of the mother. Schaffer and Emerson, 1964. For the majority of children, the mother is the principal attachment. Igor, Kotelchuk, 1976, and, when upset, children are far more likely to seek comfort from their mother than their father. Cohen and Campos, 1974. First Love 71. Mothers take the primary responsibility for child care worldwide. Brown, 1991, Ember, 1981, Geary, 2000. In many hunter-gatherer societies, like the ones in which humans evolved, women provide the majority of the calories consumed and they share their food only with their family, unlike men who share meat from successful hunts throughout the group. Most of the food consumed comes from foraging expeditions undertaken by women, carrying their infant on their back, 2 or 3 times a week. The infant is in close proximity to the mother at almost all times. They sleep, eat, and travel together. Among the Kungsan, noted for their egalitarian society, fathers provide less than 7% of childcare. Western Connor, 1976. AKA fathers in the Central African Republic have been hailed as among the most paternally minded, holding their 1 to 4 month-old infants for 22% of the time when they are in camp. But this looks fairly modest when we note that, on a typical day, a father holds his infant for an average of 57 minutes, compared to his wife's 490 minutes. Hewlett, 1988. Greater involvement shown by the mother rather than the father is not limited to infants. Between the ages of 3 and 6 years of age, children spend between 3 and 10 times more time with their mother than with their father. Whiting and Whiting, 1975, and by the ages of 4 to 10 years, they are with their mother 2 to 4 times longer than with the father. Whiting and Edwards, 1988. In the West, even in this liberal era, mothers do the majority of child care. This has been found in observational studies in the home when parents are visited at early evening, a time when many mothers have been at home all day and fathers have only just returned. Mothers perform routine caretaking chores, such as feeding and changing, between 2 and 4 times more often than fathers and spend up to twice as much time holding, touching, or playing with their child. Belsky, Gilstrap, and Rovine, 1984. At infant ages of 1, 3, and 9 months, mothers more than fathers respond to the child, care for it, and offer stimulation and positive affection. As the authors of this study noted, the only thing that men did more of than women was engage in personal leisure activity, i.e. read, watch television. Belsky, Rovine, and Fish, 1989, p. 142. Th's differential attention to children is not merely a function of the fact that mothers are more frequently in the home. In Israel, where children are cared for during the day in nurseries while both parents work, mothers are still far more frequently involved in child care duties and spontaneous interaction with the child at the end of the day than fathers. Sagi, Lam, Shoham, Der, and Lukovich, 1985. Lam, Frodi, Hwang, Frodi, and Steinberg, 1982, took advantage of innovative Swedish legislation that allowed either parent to take 9 months of paid leave after their child's birth in order to examine child rearing under the most liberal of gender role conditions.